Welcome to the Bigfoot Research Project. This video is about last summer's encounters and sightings that we had up near LOLO Pass. A year ago, while out on a training ride for our endurance horse, we encountered several Bigfoot up near LOLO Pass. That 3-hour encounter coming off that extremely steep mountain was life-changing, and due to its intensity and variety of activity, I thought that I should report it to the BFRO, the local museum, and to other investigators. Since 2016, we've had several encounters all over Oregon in both the Coast Range and in the Cascades, with rocks thrown, tree knocks, trees pushed over, whoops, chatter, howls, and culminating in the sightings. I was interested in Bigfoot before because of the knocks and some of the noises we've heard out camping, but after the sightings, it increased my interest exponentially. I'm a Bigfoot enthusiast, and I had researched Bigfoot before, but after seeing one walk towards me for 8 to 10 minutes up at LOLO Pass, I decided to try to collect proof of their existence. On most weekends year-round, we are in the deep forest, training our horses to run up trails on 10 to 20 mile loops. While already looking for predators, we've now started looking for Bigfoot. Last spring of 2020, we rode mainly in the Coast Range. Through July, we made several trips to Northrop Creek, Rears, Horse Camp, and Stub Stewart, and took our yearly trip up to Mount Adams. These are all places where we've had some activity: tree knocks, trees pushed over, whoops, screams, and other strange things happen. But when my girlfriend asked me where I would like to camp for my birthday weekend in July, I told her I wanted to video the trail that we had our sighting on the year before. By then, I had tested my new GoPro 8 on several trails and made several videos, and so I was all ready to go back up to LOLO Pass. This year we were much better prepared for a ride with a possible encounter, and I was carrying better protection, better supplies, and my new GoPro 8 to document any tracks or structures that we might see. Because sightings are supposed to be so rare, and Bigfoot are supposed to roam around and not really stay in one spot, even though we had had so much activity the year before and multiple sightings, we really didn't expect to see another Bigfoot, at least not in that area. Please check out my other video, 5 Bigfoot Sighted by Mount Hood, to get details on last year's sighting. Last year's sighting was basically terrifying. It started at the top of the mountain. I was pushing a broken bicycle down a hill for miles. It was about 6 miles back to camp, and all the way down we were harassed and had sightings, and it just wasn't as fun as people make it out to be. So what were the chances that it could happen again, right? Come to find out, better than average. And so here's what happened this year. I had a 3-day weekend off to celebrate my birthday, and so we decided to go back and film the trail where we had our sighting last year. Thought it would be fun. I mean, what could go wrong? This part of Mount Hood also has excellent riding trails, so our horse was going to get a good workout, which we were getting ready for a race, so everything was going to work out for everyone. This area had been closed due to COVID, and it was actually the opening weekend, so not many, if any, horses have ridden the trails around it yet, let alone the steep and extremely hard to go uphill that we like to go on. This trail is ridden by maybe a handful of riders each year because it is so difficult to go up and over a lot of the boulders that are up near the peak. So most people stop at the water crossing about a mile in and turn around. It's really rare for anybody to go past that. So we decided to take an evening ride and go down to the water turnaround and back, which goes right by that clearing where we had one of the sightings last year. There were very few people in the campground, and virtually nobody on any of the trails, let alone the trail that we were going to go up. So I decided to take the lead. I had my GoPro on and I was filming the ride, stopping now and then so that my girlfriend could catch up on her horse. In this video, you can see where I stop and make a whoop call. A second or two later, there was a knock reply in the clearing ahead of me.
Whoop! Whoop!
I mention it to my girlfriend when she rides up, and we're on high alert, looking and listening for any activity. We keep moving up the trail a ways and looking over to where the knock had come from to see if we could see anything moving around. Campers, hikers, just anything.
I heard a knock. It was over here.
A short while later, we arrive at the clearing where we had last year's sighting, and our horse was upset again. It seemed agitated like last year, and there was nothing in sight. My girlfriend mentioned to me how agitated the horse is right there. I watched to see where the horse was looking, and it wasn't looking across the meadow where we had seen one the year before. It was looking further up the trail. So after filming a minute or two, we decided we'd keep moving up the trail. The trail parallels the clearing, and it's just inside the tree line. A couple 100 feet later, I stopped to get a drink of water and scanned the clearing again. This time when I looked out into the clearing, I thought I saw a shadow move, and then that's when I sighted one. It was standing just behind a fallen tree, about 2 to 250 feet away. On the video, you can hear me say, "No way," or something to that effect. I couldn't believe what I was seeing, and the closer I looked at it, the better I could see it. It was a bright sunny day, and I could see pretty well what was standing out in the field. The Bigfoot was massive. I would guess it was approximately 9 feet tall, probably almost 4 feet wide in the shoulders. It was jet black, and I could see it from the waist up because the fallen tree was in front of it. It was about then our horse rode up, and its eyes were just locked on this thing. It kept staring at it, ears forward and motionless. I had my GoPro 8 on, thinking I was getting a nice clear video, and so I stood there for a while trying to just get a good clear shot of it. The horse was starting to get really agitated and it wanted to move out. My girlfriend said that she needed to keep going. Last year we had sighted a Bigfoot in the same meadow, and it was walking towards us. This one seemed content to just stand and watch us and wasn't moving towards us. So the fear factor was a little bit lower this time. And I think that also because we had seen one, well, several the year before, we weren't quite as fearful of them because we weren't attacked. They were pretty non-aggressive. And so we decided, let's go ahead and go down the trail to the river and back and move away from this thing. Just leave it be and act like it's not there. So we did. We continued on, went to the water. She practiced her water crossings on the horse. This year we're much better equipped, and even so, we both wanted to just leave. You just get this overwhelming leave feeling, and so we followed that feeling. It made a lot of sense, and that's why we went on down the trail a little bit further and played in the water for a bit. So after a while, we decided we'd put it off as long as we possibly could. We had to face the fact that we actually have to go right by that thing to get back to camp again. There's no other trails. There's no other way to get there. There's only the one trail that goes up to the top of the mountain, and that's it. So with camera rolling, we left the river and headed down the trail back towards camp. The sound of the water quickly faded away as we went down the trail and went back into the forest towards camp, and there wasn't a sound. There was no chipmunks, no birds, nothing. It was just completely silent. When I caught up to the horse, it was really upset. You can see it wanting to rear. It's just not happy at all and wants to move forward, go back to camp. So I got off the bike and walked back to the spot where we could see it fairly clearly through the trees. When I got to the spot where you could see it through the trees, it was still standing behind the same tree. It had moved over slightly, but it's basically in the same spot. My girlfriend has a theory about how Bigfoot interact with humans. She says that sighting the Bigfoot is a lot like when she sees bears on the side of the trail. She basically just keeps moving away from them and ignores them, and believes that as long as you don't antagonize them, that they'll probably just leave you alone. I personally believe that that's probably true. The only kind of X factor is that the one walked towards me last year like I was a picnic basket. So bear theory, I guess that works one way or another. So we finished riding back to camp and talk about what we saw on the way back, and I'm thinking I have the best video footage of a Bigfoot since Patty, and that this was just incredibly awesome to have survived it and have footage. What I didn't know is that my GoPro 8 shoots great wide view video, and it's crystal clear up to about 20 or 30 feet. Once you get about 100 feet away, things start to get blurry. At 200 feet, they're a blob. So I filmed a blob squatch. Of course, I didn't know that till later when I got home and put it onto my laptop. So once we hit the road, we rode back down into our campground. And to our surprise, we had new neighbors. They were camping right across from us, probably, I don't know, 50, 100 feet away, and had multiple vehicles. There were multiple people, mainly people in their 20s, some older people. A couple of horses, which was great, and they seemed like real nice people. They were playing basically the same kind of music that we like, and it was all good. We went ahead and made dinner and started a fire. It was starting to get dark. What we didn't know is that our neighbors were celebrating something or other, and we're going to stay up till 2 in the morning, 2 nights in a row, jamming their music. And they liked their music loud, really loud, in fact. And almost went over and asked them to turn it down once or twice, but at about midnight, they did turn it down about halfway. So it wasn't quite as loud, but we were able to fall asleep okay, knowing that we needed to get rest for the next day's ride because it was going to be even bigger and better. The next day was Saturday the 18th, and we decided that if the clearing was empty, we would go ahead and take a ride up the ridge. I mean, what were the chances you would see another Bigfoot, right? We were getting the horse ready for a race and needed to put 20 miles on it. Going up a steep hill like that, it doesn't have to go quite as far a distance, and so we're able to get the training in a shorter amount of time. Plus, that's the hill that I wanted to get some film footage of from the sighting that we had had the year before, because I was still determined to make a video on that. So we got our packs loaded up and we rode out. When we got to the clearing where we'd had the sighting the day before, there was nothing there. It was empty. I was tempted to go over and look for tracks, but had decided that if we're going to go for this long 7-mile ride uphill, that I need all my energy, and maybe I'd walk over there afterwards or just go the next day, and I decided just to go the next day and look for tracks. Besides, it was 9 feet tall and looked like it weighed 1,000 pounds. I didn't really want to go over to where its front room might be. So after going by the clearing really slowly, filming, we started up the ridge. After a short while, it felt like we were being watched, and all the birds and squirrels and all the noises kind of went quiet, and then they went completely quiet. A couple miles later of going up extremely steep, heavily forest ridges, we came to the first landing, and I call it a landing because basically it was all uphill to it, and it was the only flat spot on the entire trail. So we decided we would go ahead and stop and give the horse a little bit of water, drink water ourselves, and maybe eat a sandwich. I had my GoPro running right up until that moment and decided I needed to change out the battery. Of course, that's when the next encounter happens.
Here's what just happened.
Okay.
Right there, something threw a rock and it went about 50 feet up in that tree and fell down to the ground, and it made a hell of a thump when it hit. Stay tuned.
Da, da, da.
I think something's trying to get our attention up there.
And you could see the rock fall, breaking branches out of that tree all the way to the ground. When it hit the ground, it made a big thump. I kind of was stunned for a second, standing there in disbelief of what just happened. I then quickly put a battery in my camera and shot the footage of my reaction to it. The Saturday, July 18th, 2020 video sighting film is up on YouTube as well, so you can actually see what I'm talking about on YouTube. I told my girlfriend that rocks just don't fall out of trees, and if another one does, then we know it's not just an act of nature. And we both were a little scared, but decided we would continue on and move uphill. We just wanted to basically move out of there. So after a minute or two of scanning the trees with my camera, we started up the trail towards the top of the ridge. The horse likes to trot and canter uphill at about 5 to 8 miles an hour, and I have my mountain bike geared so low that I can climb really well, and I'm able to stay out ahead of it. In fact, at times I can actually pick up speed on it. At this point, we're probably, 4 or 5 miles up the ridge and on that trail, and have another mile or two to go before we reach the peak. So while I'm going up the ridge, and we probably went another half mile or so, maybe more, I started hearing something moving through the brush off to my left, and every once in a while I would stop and I'd point the camera up or downhill, whichever direction I'm kind of hearing things in. And I'm also at times still trying to document the part of the trail where we had our sightings the year before, and so you'll see both those things in the video. But I did keep hearing footsteps running next to me just from time to time, and it could have been deer, it could have been a bear, it could have been other things, but it's just kind of strange that something was basically following us up the hill. Basically at this point I'm trying to stay out ahead of the horse. I don't want to block the trail and make it slow down, so I'm keeping a pretty good pace, and I'm probably up to a minute ahead of it at times. As I was going up the trail, I noticed some odd tree structures. They were stacked in a way that it couldn't have been naturally blown down in, and some of them were wedged between trees where they shredded the bark off. And You'll see in the July 18th, 2020 sighting video that I don't get too far ahead of her. I will go up through a switchback or two and then I stop and let her catch up. I'm trying to stay fairly close to her. There's a point though that I was moving along really fast and I knew I was ahead of her, so I decided to stop and wait. She was trotting and cantering and only maybe 2 minutes behind me on the trail. And that's when she had her sighting. She said she was trotting along at about 8 miles an hour when her horse kept looking off to one side of the trail and wasn't just laser focused on the trail itself, which it usually is. She looked over to see what it was looking at, and there it was. What she saw was this. She said that she saw about a 8 to 9 foot tall figure. It was extremely dark brown, chocolate brown, or black in color, and it was running through the trees parallel to her. She said it was less than 100 feet away and that it was taking extremely long strides. She said what seemed weird about it is that its head wasn't bobbing up and down like a human runner would. It stayed pretty much parallel as it went through the trees. It almost glided.
Did you just make a whoop noise?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's one down there.
There is? Think it's the one that threw the rock?
I don't know, honey. He didn't tell me that.
Oh, well, don't be angry. They'll attack me. So you're sure there's one there, huh?
Yeah.
Bill knows it's there, huh?
Belle needs to catch breath.
Yeah, this is some hill.
She said she saw it for about 10 seconds total, for about 5 seconds, and then a few trees got in the way, and then she could see it again clearly for about 5 more seconds. It was running parallel to her on the downside of the hill, and it turned and ran up towards where I was at, further up on the hill to her left. She's not real accurate on sizes and weights or anything, but she said it was big and it moved very quickly, very fluidly. It actually was moving slightly faster than her horse, and she got a good view of it. So a minute or two later, when she reached me up where I had stopped for her, she first thing told me that she just saw one. I could see that she was scared, and I asked her if she had her sidearm, and she said no, and I told her, well, come up by me, I have mine. It was about right then that I could hear something stomping up the hillside off to my right, and
I heard something come around, walking over here. Do you got your gun? I could hear something down below me there to the right. Do you think we've gone far enough for her?
She can go a little bit further, just not as fast. You know, she just got it.
Okay, well, if I go fast, she'll go fast, so I gotta go.
You're fine.
Okay.
We're just gonna walk. I'm just gonna make her walk.
Okay.
And if I have to get down and walk ahead of her, I will.
I hear something stomping up the hillside not far away. I couldn't see anything through the trees, but I could definitely hear it, and it sounded big. I really wanted to get one on video, and she knew I did. And so I asked her if we could go a little bit further up, and there's a meadow not too far up the hill from where we were at, that if there's anything there, it'll pop out in that meadow, and then I'll have it on video. She agreed to go ahead and let's just go up to the meadow, and then we would turn around and head back down the hill. So the noises behind us kind of stopped, and we headed up the hill towards the meadow. It was only maybe 100 feet up the hill, and we came to where a big tree had been fallen right across the trail. Its roots were pushed up. It was an old dead snag, and it had limbs that were extremely pointy, pointing up right at the trail. If the horse were to try and go over the tree, it would cut itself open. And so it was really dangerous for both the horse and me to continue on. I asked her if she wanted to, and she said she could easily go around the root cluster. It was in a bad spot where it would have been a bear for me to go around. And so I said, well, maybe this is a sign. Let's just go back. And so we turned around and decided to go back downhill. So we both drank some water, and she decided she'd start heading down the hill. I told her I needed to put a new battery in. My GoPro was probably getting low, and if we saw anything, I definitely wanted to get it on camera. In the minute or two that it took to put the new battery in the GoPro, she got way out ahead of me, way further than I thought she would. But here I am on a fairly nice mountain bike with disc brakes. I thought I could easily catch her, so I railed down the hill after her. We both talked about it later, and from the moment we both saw that tree down, we both had this feeling inside, like a inner voice saying, leave now. So I guess that's why she bolted away and started heading downhill on the horse. So I was railing down the hill behind her, and from time to time I thought I'd see motion out of the side of my eye, but wasn't sure, and at the speed I was going, could have been anything. But I had spent all this money on new brakes for my bike, to come to find out they weren't really that good a quality of brake, and they were getting extremely hot. I could smell them burning. So I'd have to stop every couple minutes and dump water on my disc brakes. They would sizzle and steam would come rolling off, but they would cool off enough that they would work again. With all the heat, they would fade and stop working. So here I am trying to go down a hill real quickly, and my brakes are making all kinds of noise, squeaking because I got water on them, and then they're fading, and I'm having to stop and pour more water on it. It gets back to something my girlfriend said, that she doesn't have to be faster than a Sasquatch. She just has to be faster than the slowest person it's chasing. So with that thought in mind, I tried to rail down the hillside as fast as I could. About a half mile later, I got to the upper landing of the two landings that are on the trail. And there she was, resting her horse. She was giving it some water. And I decided to take a water break too, after cooling off my brakes. And that's when I noticed that
Heard another rock.
I could hear rocks cutting through the trees, and they were landing close to me. And not just one, it was just one rock after another. And so I walked away from my bike up the landing maybe 20, 30 feet away, and the rocks followed me. Rocks don't fly sideways through trees cutting leaves. They fall straight to the ground. So it wasn't a squirrel. It wasn't anything like that. Again, all this is recorded on the July 18th video, and you can actually see some of the leaves being cut as the rocks are being thrown at me. So my girlfriend saddled up and we started to move out. In that video, you'll notice that the horse does kind of a double take off to one side as it's turning around to leave. I heard 2 whoops, really low frequency whoops, right when it was turning around to move, and I think the video caught that. But the horse was tripping and it left quick. It did not leave slow out of that clearing, and we continued on down the trail. So we kept going down through the switchbacks another half mile or more, and her horse came to a point in the trail where it wouldn't go any further. Normally this is a very brave horse, and my girlfriend couldn't see anything ahead of her. And it's broad daylight. It's like 4 o'clock in the afternoon, so it's not like you can't see any distance, but the horse saw something or heard something and it absolutely would not go another inch. And so she asked me to take the lead. She brought the horse up in behind me, and I took the lead heading down the hill. Again, I noticed that there was no sound. There was just no forest sounds. I didn't see any birds, any squirrels, just nothing down to that point, which seemed pretty strange to me. So from that point on, there's a couple more miles back down the hill, and we got back to the creek, crossed it, went back past the clearing, and moved further down the trail all the way back to the road that goes back to camp, and got back to camp, and we figured the day was over, right? Well, no, not over yet. So basically what happened back at camp is this. We got in early enough that my girlfriend wanted to go for one more ride, so we put one horse back in the corral and got it set up with food and water, and took the other horse for another couple-hour ride up another trail that was heavily ridden. It was over by the river. And so we went on that trail ride and came back. By then it was starting to get later, and because I gathered a bunch of wood to burn, we started a fire up and started cooking dinner. The neighbors were still playing their music. They had been all day, really loud. And so we sat there eating dinner, wondering when they would turn down their music so people could get to sleep. The answer to that would be 1 o'clock in the morning. So anyways, it was middle of July, so it gets dark right around 10 o'clock at night, 9:30, 10. And the sun started to set, and there's no need to even turn on our music. Their music is so loud, it's like having ours on right next to us. But we started to hear something really strange. We could hear this howl. It was like a moaning howl, and it was so loud that you could hear it over the top of the music from where we were sitting. And you could barely hear it at first, but it kept getting closer and closer as the sun set, and it kept getting louder and louder. The moaning howl sounded like a wounded bloodhound or a wounded elk or something. It was just really strange to hear. The howl had gone on for probably about 15 minutes, and it was getting pretty dark when I decided I would go check it out. The howl was coming from the creek bed down below the campground. This creek actually circles the camp on 3 sides, but the sound was coming from one end of the campground where there's a small bridge that crosses the creek. The bridge is used by horse riders and hikers to go up the main trail that wraps around the other side of the mountain. So I decided to take my flashlight but leave it off, and I start walking up the campground road towards the creek entrance. And when I get there, it's kind of a small slope down to the creek, but the creek is about 10 feet wide, and it has blackberry bushes growing up the banks. And the blackberries are probably 10 feet tall and probably 30 feet thick to get down to the creek through, if you wanted to actually get down to the water. And between me and the blackberries is a small grove of smaller pine trees. They're 8 to 12 feet tall, and there's several of them, and that grove is probably a couple 100 feet long and probably 50 feet between the edge of the meadow and that I'm standing in and the actual blackberries that go to the creek. So I'm standing there, and it's pitch black, and I'm listening for what the howl is. As I walked away from the music, the howl became more and more clear. And what it sounded like was somebody that is deaf trying to speak. It was kind of like a mumbling, moaning speech thing, but it was like they were yelling it. It was just really loud. Very different to hear. It wasn't like any elk or deer or bear or dog that I've ever heard, and it was definitely much louder than any of those. So as I stood there, the thing was moving up the creek towards the campground from out of the forest, and I was uphill from it, maybe 100 feet away from the creek, looking down, and I could hear it crashing through the brush and stomping around down there. And it just kept going on and on and on, just moaning or yelling or screaming or whatever it was. But it changed direction, and it started moving away from the water, and I could hear it crashing through the trees coming towards me. So I was carrying more than just a flashlight, and I didn't tell my girlfriend because I didn't want her to know that I was pretty spooked. But anyways, I decided that I would let the thing come fairly close to me, and then I'd turn the light on it and see what it was. And so it kept walking towards me and crashing through the brush and stomping, and it got to a point where it should have been right at the edge of those trees, right near the clearing that I was standing in. And so I turned on my flashlight. When I turned on my flashlight, the moaning and crashing didn't stop, and it sounded like it was getting closer. It hadn't quite popped out into the meadow yet, but it was walking right towards me. And it was such a dark night, I couldn't quite see anything past the flashlight beam. It finally got too close for comfort. I couldn't see anything coming at me, but I could definitely hear it, and it seemed very upset. So I backed away from it for about the first 50 feet. Then I turned and ran the other 100 or 200 feet back to our campsite. When I got back to camp, I stoked a bunch of wood on the fire and sat down and told my girlfriend what I heard. We could both hear it had moved back down to the creek and was walking up the creek, crashing and smashing brush, tree limbs, all kinds of things, while it was still yelling and moaning, while it walked up the creek around the campground. It was yelling so loud we could still hear it well over the neighbors' music. They couldn't hear it because they're right up against their loudspeakers. So we stayed up fairly late watching the fire burn down. We didn't hear any more of the screaming, yelling noise and crashing around. I did put out a couple of motion sensor lights. They're floodlights that I have for around the horses to keep cougars or bears away, that work really well. And after a while we decided just to go ahead and go to bed. The bed in the camper loft was facing towards the corral. I do that on purpose so that I can watch the horses in the night in case a predator comes around or anything comes around to harass them. And if my floodlights go off, I jump outside to see what it is. That night I barely slept. The lights went off once or twice. I went outside, there'd be nothing there. The horses seemed pretty spooked all night. By daylight, I probably got an hour or two of sleep in, and the horses looked well rested though. So I guess whatever sleep they got, it was a deep sleep. The next day we woke up and I was determined to investigate for tracks by the clearing down by the creek where I'd sighted the big one on Friday. My girlfriend said that she had had enough and didn't want any part of it and was going to just stay back at camp and pack so we could get going. So I loaded up, took the GoPro, turned it on, and headed down to that clearing. When I got to the clearing, I walked out from where we sighted the Bigfoot to where it was standing behind the fallen tree to get a clear video of any possible footprints or a height comparison. When I walked out to the fallen tree, I found that it was about 5 feet tall, so the Sasquatch standing behind it was probably between 8 and 9 feet tall easily because I could see from its waist up. So you can see all 3 videos on my channel of the July 17th, 2020 sighting, the July 18th, 2020 sighting, and then the follow-up day where I searched for it. I called Cliff Barackman at the North American Bigfoot Center to report these sightings, and he and one of his fellow researchers went up the trail and went to the landing where the rock hit the tree and looked around. Cliff found several tracks. He actually casted those tracks, and you can see them at the museum now. There's also copies of my videos at his museum as well. Feel free to drop by. It's an amazing, amazing place with lots of different types of evidence and artifacts. After doing a little bit of research, I found that there have been several sightings right in that same area, and so it is a hot spot. But something I've learned from riding horses all over the Coast Range and the Cascade is that any place could be a hot spot. Just because it's not on a map somewhere that somebody's seen something doesn't mean that you're not going to. And the best way to hunt them is to not hunt them. Let them hunt you, attract them in, and you're going to see them. Just stay at it, keep going back up there. Eventually you'll see one. If you don't go out, you're never going to see anything. I have been asked by a fairly famous Bigfoot researcher to take him up to the top of the ridge and show him around a little bit, and I've decided to take him up on it. I'm going to go ahead and take him up there and let him have an encounter of his own. But I'll tell you, I wouldn't sleep in a tent on that ridge for any amount of money, and with all the activity that we see in the daylight, I couldn't imagine wanting to stay there at night. If you liked the video, please smash the like button and subscribe to the channel if you would like to see more videos. We'll be putting together several videos as we go. I've shot a lot of footage up in the mountains this summer that hasn't been vetted yet to see what's in there. I'll be posting those as well. Thank you so much for watching the channel, and I hope you have a great 2021. Every time you smash the like button, you bring a tear to a scientist's eye and joy to a young man's heart. The Bigfoot Research Project is about passing on what we have learned to the next generation. Please subscribe to our channel and share us with your friends. Thank you.